Thank you. Please direct your attention up front. We would like to thank our candidates running for governor for supporting North Kingstown High School's Candidates Day. After a student briefly introduces their candidate, a candidate will get a minute to offer a brief introduction about them. Then each session will run for around 20 minutes, starting with Mr. Gizzarelli. His sponsoring student will now offer a brief introduction.
It is my honor to introduce Mr. Elijah Gizzarelli, who is running for governor. Mr. Gizzarelli is running as a libertarian in order to protect the individual rights like life, liberty, self-determination, and bodily autonomy. Mr. Gizzarelli is against the war on drugs and plans to pardon all inmates with non-violent drug convictions. It is my pleasure to introduce this gubernatorial candidate, Mr. Elijah Gizzarelli.
Thank you very much, Juliana. She stole all my talking points, and now I've got nothing. All right, guys, so my name is Elijah. I was born and raised right here in Rhode Island. I graduated from Cranston West. I joined the Army at the age of 20. I was a cryptologic linguist in the Army. I was a French and Arabic translator doing counterterrorism operations stationed in Europe. And then I became a political activist. I started off as an anti-war activist, but I started doing more things, and now I'm running for governor of Rhode Island. I am running for governor because I'm not happy with the other options. And I decided instead of just wring my hands and be upset about it, I could just run against them. And so that's what I'm doing. As governor, running for governor is important to me because I see so much being going on, throughout the country, but right here at home. And one of the most common sense, basic things to stop unneeded suffering is to end the drug war, right? And so I know some people get confused when I say that. I mean, it should not be illegal to use drugs, right? I don't actually think using drugs is a good idea. I would not recommend it, right? I don't use them personally. But it is your right to choose to do with your body what you choose. And it's not the government's place to tell you you can't.
Thank you for your remarks. At this time, there will be a microphone in front of the stage, and we're offering students to come up and ask questions. Although this participation is first come, first served, students are encouraged to participate in asking questions.
My question would be, knowing the harm that drugs cause, do you have any idea, that the government might have made them illegal to protect us, and what would you be with that? What would your views be on the fact that drugs are illegal as far as protection goes for our lives?
I think that drugs being illegal harms people, right? And so we can actually see this. In 2001, Portugal was the drug addiction capital of Europe. It was horrible. They had huge overdoses. It was really terrible. You know what they did in 2001? They legalized all drugs. And right now, Portugal is leading the way with some of the least drug addictions in all of Europe, right? And so we've already seen this. This isn't like some radical new idea, right? We've actually seen it successful. Oregon actually has recently decriminalized all drugs. have we heard about how horrible, like, Oregon's on fire? No, right? Like, trust me, if they decriminalized all drugs and it caused a bunch of problems, we would be hearing about it every single day, right? On top of that, there was I'm sorry, no, I'm running a little bit long here. On top of that, there was, like, recently a drug bust in Cumberland, right? They took 660,000 Adderall pills, right? And then people think that's a good thing. It's not a good thing. The people that use Adderall in Rhode Island are still going to want Adderall. All it's going to do is increase the price, and it's going to create a power vacuum. Now people are going to be fighting over that market share. It could cause violence. Also, there was no fentanyl in those pills. And so now that there's a lack of Adderall available to users here in Rhode Island, people might be cutting in fentanyl. We could be seeing a fentanyl crisis due to that huge drug bust. The war on drugs doesn't help anybody. It only harms and destroys. It needs to end right now.
What is your opinion on banned books, specifically genderqueer?
Banned books?
Yeah.
I think that you should read as many banned books as possible.
You said those pills from up in Cumberland, there wasn't any fentanyl in it. But also at the same time, I feel like something that's known like Adderall as a prescription drug should, have someone that has a prescription using it instead of someone going out buying some Adderall that could be laced with fentanyl, or they could be going out buying some sort of painkiller like Vicodin or like Perk 30 or something, and it could just be, oh, they're dead.
I agree. Don't do Adderall unless you have a prescription, guys. In fact, if you have a prescription, I might suggest things.
I know you want to decriminalize all drugs. What's your opinion on underage drug usage?
I don't think you should do it.
Homelessness has increased by 50% in the past 4 years in Rhode Island. I was wondering how you would address that issue if you became governor.
Well, all right. So poverty is something that breaks my heart. I grew up in poverty, right? I have 6 brothers and sisters. I'm the middle child of 7, a single mother. Only three of my brothers and sisters actually even graduated high school, right? I'm very familiar with addiction. I'm very familiar with homelessness, right? And I'm very familiar with poverty. It's horrible, but it's a very complicated issue. And so what I like to say all the time is that the government breaks your leg, and then they give you a crutch, and they say, if it wasn't for me, you couldn't walk. And then they start talking about, oh, we got this new kind of crutch. We got this kind of crutch. And I'm saying stop breaking people's legs. Homelessness has increased because of the COVID lockdowns, right? They destroyed small businesses. They destroyed the economy here in Rhode Island. So I'm saying stop breaking people's legs. And so as governor, I would help to ameliorate the situation by getting government out of the way of the economy and allowing Rhode Islanders to walk all by themselves.
How do you feel about the use of marijuana in the state of Rhode Island?
I don't think it's going to harm you all that much, but again, I don't think I can't hear the question, guys.
What about the people that sell drugs and then went to jail because of the people overdosing? Will you overturn their charges?
That is actually a very good question, right? So so my first day in office, what I'm saying, right, is that I will release all non-violent drug offenders, right? What I would say is that any drug dealer that knew that they had fentanyl
Please direct your attention up front.
My name is Arturo Porto, and it is my honor to introduce Zachary Hurwitz, who is running for governor. Yes, George! Mr. Hurwitz supports building more affordable housing and supports increasing mental health resources for students and teachers. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our next Rhode Island governor, Zachary Hurwitz. Good morning, North Kingstown. How are we doing today? People that don't know me, my name is Zachary Hurwitz, and I'm the youngest person in Rhode Island history to run for governor. And I graduated from North Kingstown just last year. Don't tell Mr. Powell, but I think I still have some overdue assignments before graduation. Thank you and Mr. Varia for inviting me to candidates today. We have less than 2 weeks before the election, and I'm working hard to share my story, my policy positions, and to show everyone, including you, that you have a voice. That right now, we can inspire this generation and have people more involved in the community, to become more civic leaders. It's important for our future to start today, to understand the policies of our towns and our state, to bring ideas of how to improve Rhode Island and improve the lives of everyone inside of it, whether that be through education, affordable housing, cost of living, and most importantly, seeing and setting our priorities straight. All right, and thank you so much, and I'll happy to take any questions you guys have.
We're now taking questions. Any student with a question may come up to the front of the stage.
Zach, how will you change the older people's minds and let them know that a younger person can lead the government, and have the older people's ideas let a younger person run Rhode Island?
Mr. Boers, thank you so much for your question. This country is founded by people who are, younger than 35. It has happened before. Young people have always been progressive. They've always been trying to make change in our state. My goal is to hopefully tell those people, remind those older generations that they used to be us. They used to be the young people marching the streets for civil rights. So I hope that they will be able to see and empathize with us on why we need change, on that we're fighting for our futures. So that's my goal. And thank you so much for your question.
So, Mr. Hurwitz, I saw on your campaign's Instagram page that you have a plan to reduce gun violence in Rhode Island. Would you care to share that plan?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for your question. As of right now, one of my plans for gun violence is just common sense. That's at the end of the day. I'm sorry, but even the shooting in St. Louis just yesterday could have been preventable, right? All right. So whether that be mental health checks for people with for people buying guns, raising the minimum age for semi-automatic weapons from 18 to 21, anything that we can do that can make sure that our Second Amendment right is protected, but also making sure that there's common sense when it comes to protecting our citizens. No child should have to go to school wondering if it's going to get shot up. That's a horrible way to live. No person should go to church wondering if that is the last day they'll live. That's not the correct way to live, and hopefully we're able to change that.
Hello, I know this question gets asked a lot, but it's a very pressing topic. So I was just wondering what your stances are on abortion laws in Rhode Island and your thoughts on the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Well, as of right now, Rhode Island has policies in place which keep abortions safe and legal in our state, and I truly believe that's how it's supposed to be. We should do everything in our power to keep women safe. We should be giving them support that is provided to make sure that they make the correct decisions that they can make on their own choice. And whether that be improving education, whether through contraception or anything like that, is the perfect way that we can hopefully bridge that gap between such a controversial issue in the state and our country.
Hi, this probably isn't a helpful question if I'm being honest, but you didn't say this in your like introduction speech. Where do you politically identify as like, are you an independent or are you like a Democrat or Republican? Because I don't know if it's super relevant when you're running for governor, but I kind of think it would be an interesting thing to know.
No, it's a good question. I mean, and the thing is, right now, if you identify yourself as a Democrat or Republican, you automatically alienate the entire other side of the conversation. That's why I'm running as an independent, so people can look past the D, the R, or the I next to the name, but to actually look closer into my policies to see if they agree with me. Because you can't just not listen to a person just because they have a D or an R next to their name. You actually have to make sure that those policies that you're voting for and the policies that you're against, you have to make sure that how it's going to affect you, your families, and your neighbors.
Sort of to continue that, you are really young. So if you become the governor, do you have any political aspirations like beyond that?
I mean, if I become governor, I mean, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Like, well, I mean, it's insane. I mean, I know there's a snowball's chance of me winning, but I genuinely do believe that I am possibly one of the better options for governor than a couple of other people. Yes, sir! Yeah, of course. I genuinely do believe that young people should be more involved in the community, and I hope to inspire some people to get more active in politics and be more active in their community in general. But thank you.
I like your response just there. Personally, I do think that, we need to work more as people. I came up here asking a question yesterday about, Seth Epstein, Alan Fung, some whole sort of debacle, but I like the stance you're taking, being an independent. But what are your views on taxation?
Taxation in general? Or?
Taxation in general. Do you take more of a Democratic side, more of a Republican side?
I believe I'm more fiscal when it comes to it because genuinely, I mean, no one likes taxes. We're taxed at one of the highest tax rates in the country in Rhode Island, which is absolutely horrible. One of my goals would be to try to have tax cuts for senior citizens and for veterans and people that fought for our country. So I believe I'm a little bit more fiscal when it comes to it, but we still have to figure out how we spend our money rather than raising taxes just to cover spending that we don't even know what we're spending on.
The new increase in infants in the hospital due to the respiratory disease, how would you help or support the hospitals?
Well, as of right now, I mean, first off, great question, thank you for asking. As of right now, our hospitals are overburdened by what happened with COVID. Hopefully, I'll be able to, using legislation to put more emphasis on health centers and telemedicine, we'll be able to lay the burden off the hospitals so they can actually focus on people who need real help, people who are in critical condition, who have high areas of trauma. Because that's, as of right now, we need to protect our nurses, we need to protect our hospitals and make sure that they can actually do a correct job with how they're treating people, especially Rhode Islanders.
At the beginning of your introduction, you mentioned mental health. What are you going to do to help support our teachers and students that hasn't already been done?
Thank you so much for asking that. That's like, I just want to take a real serious note here. This entire school, all the teachers, all students, we've been through so much in the past couple of years. I graduated here last year. I saw how much the teachers were struggling, how much the students were struggling. We need mental health resources in place that can support our teachers and our students so that teachers can teach to the best of their ability and so that students can learn to the best of their ability. Because teachers, I mean, you guys, kudos to you. You guys are practically one of the most important jobs that we have in this country. And students, and you guys are the future of our generation. So we need to be taking care of both you guys, and we need to be supporting all of you through tough times and hardship.
So drugs is a very common topic when it comes to politics, especially nowadays. I was wondering where you stood when it came to like decriminalization or even legalization of some or most drugs.
Well, it really depends on the damage that it causes to, human welfare in general. If we're talking about, say, marijuana, I'm not against the legalization of marijuana. I do believe that there's been multiple studies that show the benefit of it for medically, and if people would like to buy it recreationally, I mean, yeah, of course, I do, yeah, of course, I'm not against that, and I do believe that we should be looking toward other states such as Massachusetts, such as Colorado, to see how they regulate it, to see how they manufacture and distribute such type of substance.
Unfortunately, our scheduled time for this session will elapse shortly. We have time for one more question, then we'll allow 1 minute for closing remarks.
Just want to let you know, first off, you have my vote already.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So I don't know, what are your opinions on teen drug use?
Teen drug use?
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I mean, we've seen the studies about how it can negatively affect a person, and I'm strongly against it. I mean, and I don't recommend that you do it, simply put, because, obviously. But when it comes down to it, we need to make sure that we have places so that people don't turn to drugs, that we need to have the mental health resources so that people don't choose drugs over, say, therapy. We need to put in place things so that they can feel supported, they can feel needed, so that they don't need to turn to such an illicit substance. Thank you. Closing statement? Well, thank you guys so much for having my time. It's truly been a pleasure, but I just want to say, this has just been absolutely amazing. It's been a wild ride, and I don't have millions of dollars in my bank to put ads on TV. In fact, like I said in my previous debate, I have like $3 in my wallet. I have not been invited, even though I haven't been invited to most of the debates, but I do have ambition. I have drive, and although it's an uphill battle for me, I am determined to share my voice and to show others that it's not about being on the left or being on the right, about having a D or an R, but by bringing people together and to show that we are a great state, and to show that our generation can do great things and that we can change our own future. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's truly been an honor, and just make sure to back Zach this November. Thank you guys so much.
My name is Ethan Ringler, and it is my honor to introduce Ms. Ashley Callis, who is a Republican candidate running for governor. Ms. Callis is a Gold Glove boxer and a successful small business owner. It is my honor to introduce our next governor, Ms. Callis.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction, and I want to thank the other candidates for coming here today. I have never run for office, and this is the first time for me doing it. And the experience of moving from a private individual to a public one has been an interesting learning experience. I never would have imagined that I would be running for governor. I, like many folks who graduate college in Rhode Island, had to leave because there was an opportunity in the state. And then I ended up building a successful business somewhere else. When I came back to Rhode Island, because I always wanted to come back, my husband's from New York, the Bronx, and he doesn't understand the lake is not the ocean. I built a business in the Midwest, and I was raised South Shore, Massachusetts, and I always wanted to come home. And when I was finally able to come home a decade later, I saw that the problems that made my family leave in the first place, Rhode Island was not an affordable place to live, work, and raise a family. We had an education system that was broken in some places. In some places it's good, in other places it's not. And I saw that these same people, the same men, literally the same people that made me leave in the first place were still in office, and in a lot of ways they had failed their way up, and there wasn't change. So I had a choice. I could sit back and watch my kids probably have the same future that I had, which is that they would have a nice time growing up here and then look at me and say, hey, I'm going to go to New York or Boston for opportunity. Or I could try to make a difference. So you know the end of the story. I'm the Republican nominee for governor in the state. We are down to a single-digit race because ultimately my message is one of change. I deeply believe that we can change the future of the state. But it will take somebody different, somebody that's not from politics, somebody who's not a career politician, somebody that is not beholden to special interests, and someone who will speak truth to power and get things done. So I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much for having me today, and let's go. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. At this time, the microphone is available to any student who has questions.
Good morning. My name is Jacob Nicolato. In 2019, before the pandemic, 86 million people visited Rhode Island. Of those 86 million people, around 8 million traveled through Rhode Island International Airport, which, by the way, does not fly anywhere internationally. And so...
Go to Mexico. I mean, we do, but a few places. Sorry, I'm so defensive of Rhode Island. A few places. But we need to go more places, yeah.
All right, my question is, how are you planning to increase tourism? Because like 17% of the government's income is from tourism.
Yeah, and so in order for us to increase tourism, and that's a critical part of the blue economy, which I think we need to invest in. That is the economy of the future for Rhode Island. We've done studies of what the blue economy is. It is the sustainable use of the ocean for economic development. But overall, we need to create a better business environment so that businesses want to be here, companies feel that they can stay. What that looks like is it looks like reducing taxes and regulations so we're more competitive. Because when we look to our neighbors, when we look to Massachusetts and Connecticut, it's easier to do business there. Entrepreneurs feel that they can make it. I don't worry so much about big businesses, honestly. They'll be fine. They have lobbyists, they have lawyers, they always figure it out. It's small businesses, like the one I started a business, and it was just my husband and myself. We had a little baby, we came from medicine. We had an exam room, and we had two exam rooms in 1,000 square feet. And one person would be with the baby while the other person was with the patients. We'd have 8 employees. And eventually we grew into a large multi-million-dollar business the size of a small hospital. But the reality is that it is in that phase, when you are a small business, that it is the hardest to do business, and you need a government that is facilitative, that encourages entrepreneurship. If we do that, we will be able to bring more business into the state. But we have to have somebody who is willing to make the hard changes. All right, thank you.
So you mentioned the education system. So what do you plan to do about the 25% absentee rate in Providence school systems?
Yeah, so there was a report that came out that basically said that the school system is in crisis. And the reality is that we have RICAS scores that have not been released, that could be released, they're being held up for an election, which is unacceptable. We have trapped children in failing schools for a generation now. The absentee problem is part of a larger problem in Providence, a problem that relates to parental involvement, engagement, and having a school system that is functioning. We need to do the hard work of educational reform. Listen, I'll tell you, I was not a good student in high school. I was one of those kids that had high IQ, low performing, whatever they call it. They sent me to college for high school because not every sort of school is for every sort of student. And so I probably was one of those high absentee kids, like I didn't go when I didn't feel like it, until I was put into an environment that worked for me. And for me, that was going to UMass Boston for college during high school. So there are different reasons that kids are absent, but when we talk about Providence, there is a deep systemic issue, and we need someone to do the hard work of educational reform. The reason I was able to access education in that way is because in the 1990s, for the first time in 20 years, a Republican governor was elected, and they worked collaboratively with the legislature to ensure that they did the hard work of educational reform. Education was a constitutional right, a quality education. I benefited from that. People did not give up on me because they had to find a solution for me. That is what I want for all students in Rhode Island. And you need a different sort of leader to get that done. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hi. Why do you love Rhode Island, but because you left it?
Listen, that's a great question. And it's actually a question of choice, right, a lot of times, which is you can love a place, but at the end of the day, if you have $250,000 of student loans, which back then that was a house. I didn't have a mom's house to move back into. My husband is the son of a Holocaust survivor. We did okay as a handyman, but there was no safety net for me. If we failed, there was nowhere to go. And so sometimes, if you talk about who has privilege and who doesn't, it's all about choices. And sometimes, if you don't have a support system, you have a lack of the ability to choose the life that you want, and it's hard. And so the first thing that I did when I had the ability to come back is we did come back. My children will likely not have to make that choice because of how we've done in business, but that doesn't mean that that's changed who I am, and it doesn't mean that I want anybody to have to leave Rhode Island because they don't think that they can make it. Because Rhode Island has always been a great state, but we have had leaders that have let us down and made it so that the quality of your education depends on your zip code. The economy is not broad-based. There is not affordable housing. So if you don't have a safety net, you might not be able to make it here, but we can change that. Thank you.
Okay, so speaking of affordable housing, what is your plan to make housing more affordable?
Yes, so we have a lack of housing stock. We have not been building houses for the last decade. And so we need to get involved. We have federal money put towards housing, $250 million. But we need housing quickly. So we need to immediately encourage things like the conversion of single-family housing to multi-family housing units. That allows us to quickly create houses in places that it makes sense. We also need to make development a little bit easier. It takes years often to go through zoning. So we need to change our approach to building houses, but we have to want to build houses. And what happens is, a lot of times people say they want to build houses, but cities and towns put in all sorts of obstacles to prevent that. We have money to help get through those obstacles now, but you need to have a governor that will go into the cities and towns and say, how can I help you meet your 10% goal for housing in a way that actually expects that they produce housing units? All right, I hope that helps. We need to produce housing units. All right, thank you.
Hi. So we talked a lot about economic stuff, which is really helpful for understanding your platform, but I have a question regarding social legislation.
Sure.
So you talked a lot in the beginning about how you want to change the way Rhode Island is run, and you think that things should be different. Recently, we passed a series of gun laws, sort of protecting Rhode Island citizens from gun violence through age restrictions and anti-open carry. What are your opinions on gun legislation in Rhode Island? Do you think that we should have more common sense gun legislation, or would you open the door for more people to own weapons?
So we have some of the strictest gun legislation in the country. And unfortunately, that doesn't translate into preventing violence. So in terms of the gun laws that were recently passed, I supported the law with the long guns. I felt that if you're old enough to serve your country, you should be old enough to carry a firearm. So there was no military exemption in the law in terms of raising the age, and I think that should have been there, but that would have been okay if that were there, because it's hard to say, okay, carry a gun for your country, but now you're not old enough in other contexts. And I do not support the magazine limit, and I'll tell you why. It's because that law, if you follow where we are in terms of what we think is going to happen, is that law is likely not constitutional. And so it'll be struck down if you follow what's going on federally. The other part is that the issues that we have with safety have to also do with enforcing the laws that we have on the book. And there's something that I call performative politics, where you sign laws, but you have no intention of ever enforcing them. And that is what we see right now. And so if you do things for photo ops, which is what politicians often do, but don't follow up with the hard work of making sure that communities are safe, making sure that we deal with the underlying causes of violence, which it's much harder to do that, to deal with mental health, substance abuse, than to sign a law that you have no intention of enforcing. That is the easy way out. We need to deal with these structural, systemic issues that are about violence, and then if we have laws, we need to enforce them. But if somebody takes a picture to get an endorsement, but then it doesn't actually make sure that people are held accountable, and I'm somebody who believes in second chances. in a deep, fundamental way, I believe in criminal justice reform. But you need to enforce the laws, otherwise you are just taking photo ops and saying, I got this endorsement, I got that endorsement. You will hear a lot of that tonight after following me. And the reality is, I care about results. Performative legislation is just for the photo op, and then we are still not safer. Thank you.
As a woman candidate, what are your thoughts on overturning? As a woman candidate, what are your views on the overturning of Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, so this would, the way you phrase it also sort of, so the question is, as a female candidate, what are my feelings about the overturning of Roe v. Wade? This process has been hard on me as a female candidate because I feel that this election, and if you've seen the commercials, my kids have seen the commercials about me saying I'm going to take away rights, and that's just not true. The right to an abortion was codified in state law in 2019. I believe that people spoke through their elected officials, meaning there is a right to an abortion in the state that will not change. And I believe that end was legitimate because people spoke through their elected officials. That's why we elect them. I will do nothing to change that law. And when I was asked about how I feel as a woman, I was honest, which is that I'm pro-life. I do not believe in late-term abortion. I went through difficult pregnancies, so as a person, that is not something for me. And the timing, and this is, we can talk about feminism, not being, all of this about being a woman candidate. The timing of my question, which is a deeply personal female question about myself, to my ability to do my job, is actually anti-woman. Meaning, I can believe, as a person, I can have a belief, and as governor, I will enforce the law. And the law is that there is a right to an abortion in Rhode Island. Nothing will change that. I can believe something privately and still do my job. And so I hope that the people here will hear that, because that was the most upsetting thing to hear, where you tie a personal belief as a woman to the ability to execute on a professional role. We are beyond that, and we need to be beyond that as a state. Thank you.
You talked about how, like, the laws that were passed, there's not really a lot of enforcement going on there, and you think it's like all for show.
Yes.
Gun violence is still like really relevant, especially in this country.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do to decrease the violence if you think the laws aren't really doing anything?
Because if you don't enforce them, that's a good question. So it goes back to enforcement. So we have a lot of laws on the books. So if somebody gets caught with a gun, we can't just let people back on the streets to commit more violence. And so it's about making sure that we help people that are unsafe because they're sick, right? Because we need to, mental health is a health issue. We need to have a support system around that. Also, we have an opioid crisis, a substance abuse crisis that has been going on, and we need providers, and we also need to not treat that like criminality, but we need to treat that like a medical issue, which is what it is. And so if we start doing that hard work, we're making changes in terms of what will ultimately happen. But if somebody gets caught breaking the law, there needs to be a consequence. We cannot have a revolving door where there isn't a consequence. That doesn't mean that when somebody does the time, right, that they should have a path to forgiveness and being able to contribute in society. Those things can happen together. But what we have right now is politicians who do things to remain in power, sign legislation, say they keep you safer, but they actually don't keep you safer. Signing bills, it doesn't keep a community safe. What's keeping the community safe is making sure that we have the resources needed for the community, that we enforce the laws so that people that are violent do not commit violence on other individuals. You cannot, if somebody's violent, you cannot just book them and then have them out again. That's a danger to the community. We also have laws to protect the community. So a lot of it is enforcement and dealing with the hard issues that lead to violence. I am sorry, I understand that this is a time when people feel unsafe. But creating more laws with no intention of following through or not dealing with the hard issues, that will not make us safer. It just makes people feel better, but it is not better if we don't stop the problem. All right, thank you. talk about not doing what the rest of the country's doing. I mean, Rhode Island is behind, was behind. That should have happened already. That should have happened a few years ago. Maybe that's because, I don't know, I'm probably one of the youngest candidates running for governor, so I didn't get what was taking so long. I'm 40. I know that might seem old to people here, but it's actually pretty young to be a gubernatorial candidate. So I'm for decriminalization of marijuana. We already made it legal. The only thing we need to make sure of is quality. Is that I want to make sure that people know what they're getting, because it's still a drug, which means it needs to be regulated, but we need to make sure that it's safe so that you know what you are getting. That's something we need to work on. We also need to work on making sure that if somebody was convicted of a crime that is no longer a crime, we need to make it a very sincere attempt in an efficient manner to make sure that there is expungement and people are not punished for things that are now legal. That's about second chances and making sure that we have an equitable society here. Thank you.
Unfortunately, our scheduled time for this session will elapse shortly. We have time for one more question, then a minute for closing remarks.
What is your plan to reduce the homeless population?
Yes, so this is, we need to deal with our housing crisis. So we need short-term solutions to build housing units. So talking about that conversion of single-family homes to multifamily homes to making sure that can happen. But we also need to provide immediate shelter. We have 12 to 1,500 individuals right now who are going into the winter without a place to sleep. I was actually at a homeless march asking for immediate action because we have known this is going to be an issue and there is no shelter. And the governor has not taken action. There is no place. And these are our mothers, our fathers, our sisters, our brothers. I think we can find a place in our communities to make sure that people are not cold. And rather than just saying, I've written a check for this money, which is what you hear on the other side, in business, I don't just write checks. I say, when am I going to get what I'm supposed to get, and how many beds am I going to get? And we need to say that it is unacceptable that we don't have shelter. There is an ability to do that. Part of the reason we have this issue right now with homelessness that is an emergency is that communities have not been consulted. So what has happened is with the Nilo Hotel, which happened last year, is that there was an emergency shelter and the community was upset because they weren't engaged in the process. We did not learn from that example. And not only did we not learn, we did not plan for the crisis to continue in this year. So now there's no Nilo Hotel because the community doesn't want it. There's no conversations with communities to solve the problem. And at the end of the day, there are people that are still cold and do not have a roof over their head. And talk about an election season and consequences, what I will say is that there was talk of doing it in Cranston, but instead of providing a solution to shelter, which is what the governor should do, he will wait until after the election because he does not want communities to be mad at him for sheltering people. I would say that as a state, we are compassionate enough, we are small enough, we are able to deal with a solution, and it is cold outside now. We need shelter now. Thank you. My closing remarks. Thank you for having me today. I'll ask something of you, and I know that maybe not everybody can vote for me yet. I ask you to look at my positions. Go on my website, look at my policies. Rather than the letter behind my name, because I think what you will see is someone who has policies that are more about taking care of Rhode Island than a specific party view or perspective. It is very easy to buy into an idea of what a person is like from a party, because that's the easy way. The policy work and the person's experience to make change really is how you should elect a governor. So I will say that for the last number of decades, it is the same sort of people who have been in positions of power. And that has resulted in an educational crisis, an economic crisis, and if we do not change this, nothing will change in the state. And while some communities are okay, others are not. And so this election is critically important for the future of the state because we are going into a recession. And we need somebody who's willing to do things like provide immediate relief, make sure we have shelter for the homeless, and ensure that we tackle the hard questions of education in the state. So I encourage you to look at my platform, listen to what I say, learn more about me, and consider voting for a person over a party. And if you like what I have to say, please tell others. Thank you so much.
Hello, I am Evelyn Carroll, and it is my honor to introduce Governor Daniel McKee, who is running for a second term as Rhode Island Governor. Governor McKee is our Democratic candidate for this year's election. He served as Rhode Island's Lieutenant Governor from 2015 to 2021 when he took office as governor during one of the hardest times in Rhode Island history, considering the COVID-19 pandemic. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our next Rhode Island Governor, Governor Daniel McKee.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here at the high school, and the last time I was here, you had a Teacher of the Year, and they had a great pep rally out in the, on the football field. It was really exciting, and a great deal of enthusiasm here for not only from the students but also teachers as well. And it's so important that we really focus on education in the state of Rhode Island, and that's one of the areas that I certainly do focus on. As Evelyn said, I was Lieutenant Governor and became governor when former Governor Raimondo became Secretary of Commerce in the Biden administration. Since then, we've really focused on trying to keep people healthy, which we are a lot healthier today. We're the best vaccinated state in the country, and working on the economy. We lead the Northeast on an economic recovery with the work that we've been doing. Focusing on education is a real key, and I'd love to talk about that if you have questions about that. And then equity issues across the board, I think are really important. Whether it has to do with race issues or LGBTQ issues, excuse me on that one, but a lot of letters to put together. But I think the point is, we need to make sure that we're supporting each and every person that lives in the state of Rhode Island, regardless of what they believe and how they live their lives. So, I would like to open it up, ask any questions you like, and I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you for your remarks. At this time, the microphone is available in the front of the stage for any questions.
Good morning, Governor McKee.
Good morning.
Question. The truck tolls were meant to fund the repair of bridges and roads. What will happen to the bridges and roads if the truck toll is no longer viable?
So the roadworks program is really important for our state because as we are talking about the economic viability of our state, the infrastructure is very important. So I support the roadworks program. We have appealed that decision. Thank you for the question. But we got to be prepared either way. If the ruling holds up, we're going to have to figure out another way to fund that through the budget. We are not going to tax any cars, and we're not going to. I would not support any expansion of the tolling. But right now, we're going to stop because of a court ruling, and then we've appealed it. We'll work to defend the position that the state took a few years back. And then we also will take a look at this current budget so that when we get back in January, the lost revenue on the tolling, we need to make sure that we find a way to put those dollars in because we've got to keep that program going. 27% of our bridges were unsafe when that program started. 17% now about unsafe. Within 3 years, we'll be less than 10%, which is going to be a very important thing. Not only on the roadworks for the roads and on the bridges, but also we're investing $91 million in our roads this year. I think you're seeing paving going on around the whole state of Rhode Island. And inside the budget that I just managed, we had the largest surplus in the history of the state of Rhode Island, and we took $100 million of that surplus, $100 million of that surplus, and freed up $400 million of federal money to do roads and bridges around the state of Rhode Island over the next few years. Good question. We've got to make sure that the roadworks program keeps going. We'll appeal, and based on the decision of our appeal, we'll strategize to make sure that that program keeps on going to improve of our infrastructure in the state of Rhode Island.
As governor, do you have any plan to help small businesses?
So I had 10 minutes to open up my introduction. I am a small business person. My family has been in the small businesses for generations, and we have made small business a really important issue for Rhode Island. How many families own small businesses? Do you want to just raise your hand in here? No. Right. Yeah. So the small businesses are so important. So one of the first things I did, because coming out of the pandemic, we were really worried about whether the small businesses were going to stay open or not, and whether the people who had jobs at those small businesses were going to continue to have jobs. So immediately what I did was I put $30 million out for small business grants and spread out that over $5,000 grants to over 6,000 small businesses in the state of Rhode Island. That helped keep the lights on, helped maybe pay a rent, pay a mortgage. And right now, we continue to do that work. I leave here and I go to East Greenwich to visit a half a dozen small businesses. I was in the east side of Providence earlier in the week. One of the things we're doing, if you have a small business, your family's in small business, we're asking this question of all our small businesses. Let's level the playing field between Rhode Island and Massachusetts, right? Between Connecticut and Massachusetts, so that our small businesses are competitive. I'll give you an example. Last year in the budget, I put a small business-friendly article in the budget. That means when the budget gets passed, that those things that we submit become law. So just simply, I'll give you one example. So before last year, motorcycle shops, right? If you traded in a motorcycle in a shop in Connecticut or Massachusetts, a $5,000 trade-in on a $20,000 motorcycle, you paid sales tax on $15,000, right? The net, the difference. Rhode Island wasn't like that till last year. We put that in the budget. Now, if a motorcycle is sold, beginning October 1st, which I have a picture of the first motorcycle sold, the trade-in value offsets the sales price, and then we charge the sales tax on the difference, right? And that level the playing field. So we're trying to find level playing fields with our small businesses. I'll put another article in the budget this year about paint recycling, about issues that have to do with mattress recycling, and many other things. So if you have ideas, we'd love to sit and talk about with anybody who has interest in small business in the school here. I'd love to come back and actually sit down and talk to you about that. Okay? And I did, as a lieutenant governor, we ran a entrepreneur challenge for young businesses. Anybody here in business already? Anybody already started a business? Do you want to just yell it out what it is? No? But yes, we have a lot of high school students that are running businesses. I know you have a great business program because I just talked to, it's Connor, right? Yeah, Connor told me that there's a great business program here. So I'd love to come back and actually sit down and give you ideas on that. Okay? Thank you.
So, Mr. McKee, some of our fellow New England neighbors, such as Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, are all ranked within the top 10 in terms of education in our country. However, Rhode Island isn't that high up. And in terms of myself, I'm lucky to have been born and raised in a town with an amazing high-ranked high school like this one, but I understand that not every Rhode Islander has the same privilege that I do. So do you have any plans to maybe bridge the gap between education in our state and our fellow New England states?
Yeah, what I would expect, and I've set out a really high goal, it's one that we're going to reach. We'll be reaching Massachusetts levels in education by 2030. And we'll be moving towards that area each and every year. Now, I also want to tell everybody in the audience here, as well as the teachers, I think on that same list where, the New England states were, a couple of them slightly higher than Rhode Island, I think we're 11th on that list. So we're not like at the bottom of the list in the country, right? But we can get better. And I have worked in education in a way that I'm very confident that we will. I think many here, if you're asking that question, you know that the state of Rhode Island stepped in and now is managing the schools in Providence. That puts me in a spot where I really will take a personal interest in that. And the plan is, this is the plan. It's one that we can achieve, and we will. It's bringing in people that are interested in achieving what you just asked, right? And so it's not only the parents and the families and the students and the teachers, the administrators, but it's also the business community. It's a governor, it's your local elected officials, it's your higher ed, it's your K through, pre-K through 12. And I'll just give you a couple of things that we've already planted the seed that I think are going to make a significant difference. So there's a bond question on the ballot. Please, if you're 18, vote for it. If you know people who are 18 and older in your family, ask them to vote for it. $250 million we put on a bond for school improvements. Another $50 million of the surplus that I manage has gone in directly into school building improvements in the state. We also believe in the higher ed, so we're going to be investing very strongly in Rhode Island College, URI, and CCRI. We have close to $200 million of new revenues that are going to go into those our state schools to help continue to improve the schools in the state. Yesterday, I don't know if you read, but first Dr. Jill Biden, our First Lady, was in our state on my invitation. And where do we go? We went to Rhode Island College to talk about recruiting and respecting and retaining teachers. Teachers from all different walks of life. Anybody interested? Has anybody decided that they might want to pursue a path of teaching? What did you say? Well, yesterday I was with 300 students that are preparing to be teachers. That is, if we're interested in achieving that goal of becoming outperforming our New England states, just like we did on the small businesses, we want to be better than our bordering states. We want to be better on education issues and compete that way. Teachers, and there was a number of students there from Mount Pleasant High School that I saw and talked to that are now in a teacher preparation program. And so it's a combination, like I said, of bringing everybody together that really wants to see this happen. And I've done this as a mayor in Cumberland, and it's also making it so that education becomes a declaration that says that's our priority. And it's a 52-week-a-year strategy. And open up opportunities for the people who live in our cities and towns in North Kingstown to have opportunities on an education to help develop their skills 52 weeks out of the year. So there's ways that we can do it in school, and there's ways that we can do it out of school, and we're going to invest in really significant ways, and I'm going to make a commitment to make sure this happens. Thank you.
I know you mentioned the teacher education program. Do you have any other specific plans to deal with teacher shortages throughout the state or to deal with student absenteeism throughout the state?
So the question is to develop more teachers? Yes. That's why Dr. Biden was here with me yesterday. We really need to make sure that we do those three things, which is a national strategy, which we are adopting locally, which means recruit, retain, and respect our teachers. Because you're not going to achieve the levels of the last questioner asked to make sure that Rhode Island continues to improve on the scale to us the very best in the country unless you have really good teachers. And we need to support our current teachers in a way. My wife Susan was a career teacher, a reading specialist. I have a great deal of respect for those the teachers in the classroom today. But we also, when you're talking about developing and creating a core group of teachers in the future, we want to make sure that we include every community that makes up our communities, right? So if we want to make sure that the teachers represent the kids that they're teaching, right? We want to make sure that that is there. So I think what it is, I believe what it's going to be is for Rhode Island, it's going to be a really strong investment in our Rhode Island College and URI and CCRI with a very strong emphasis on the value of teachers. And what I expect is that I think that many people, even some that don't realize it in this audience, you're going to see a calling that says, I want to help others learn. I want to help others learn to read. I want to help others develop their skills in math. I want to help others, develop their leadership skills, their character skills, and that's what good teachers do. So we are all in, and I'm all in on making sure that we do everything that in our power to help all our students in the state today and in the future. So that's the thing. All right. Thank you. I got to speed up the answers.
Even with the program where you can do 2 years free at CCRI and then transfer to URI, college is still very expensive. So is there anything you'd be willing to do to make college less expensive, such as making state schools free?
So right now I did sign to make permanent the college promise at CCRI, which is really a strong opportunity in addition to the Pell Grants, which are increasing. We're supporting increasing the Pell Grants. We're going to support at Rhode Island College a Hope Scholarship, which I've been talking to the president of Rhode Island College, where there will be a scholarship strategy for students in their junior and senior year, which will be a Hope Scholarship. We are also supporting, and I know that I referred to President Biden and the tuition forgiveness strategy. We're supporting that as well. So I think you're going to see more and more efforts to make sure that the cost of college is affordable to the students and the families that are seeking out that education.
Unfortunately, our time for this session will elapse shortly. We have time for one more question, then around a minute for closing remarks.
This is a very short question. I just gotta ask, why'd you call Miss Kalos a carpetbagger?
Well, I'd be happy to answer that question, but I think that her residency in the state of Rhode Island has been less than a year. Her registration to vote has been less than 6 months, and a declaration to run for governor was right after that. So that's the definition. Somebody who comes in, right, that has not been here for any length of time, and then campaigns for the highest office in the state of Rhode Island. All right, we did good. Thank you so much. I would just say that right now, Rhode Island has momentum like we've never seen before. #1 in vaccinations, leading the Northeast in the economy. The lowest unemployment rate in the history of the state of Rhode Island, and there's still good paying jobs available. We are investing in the people of the state of Rhode Island, whether it's in the fisheries in Galilee, or whether it's right here in North Kingstown and Quonset. Millions of dollars are being invested in that port to create good paying jobs for the people who live in our communities. The other piece that I really want to say, because the economy is important, but let's talk about the issues that really impact us personally. The decision by the Supreme Court to reverse Roe v. Wade was a travesty, in my opinion. We had Supreme Court justices, as they're confirmed, tell us that that was going to be the law of the land, and they did the exact opposite. This election, the governor in the state of Rhode Island, is a stark contrast between myself believes in good gun safety policies to keep us safe, making sure that women have the right to choose, and someone who does not believe in that. Someone who has supported that Supreme Court decision. And then where is it going to end? Marriage equality? Voting rights? We need to make sure we protect not only the issues that drive our economy, but we also need to protect our rights, the things that we've earned. And reversing that in the state of Rhode Island makes no sense at all. Let's elect the Democrats that are on the ticket, who will believe in protecting our rights, who believe that we're heading in the right direction on an economy that's going to support our families, and who believe, as I do, that education is going to be key for the growth of the state of Rhode Island. Thank you all.